Okay, so speaking of tickets going for $8, let's go ahead and transition now to a team that I'm assuming the tickets are going to be a lot more expensive because of just how much everything has changed. The Carolina Panthers. So Mark, we are gosh, it's April 10th. We're recording on April 10th. If you're watching on a different date, and we are what, a little more than 2.5 weeks away from the NFL draft. The Panthers are on the clock. I have that ESPN NFL draft like little ding 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 like that little like tone stuck in my head. I'm tone deaf, so forgive me on that part. But I, it's interesting because we know it's going to be a quarterback for the Panthers. The question is just which quarterback is it going to be? Um, so what we are going to do today is rank our top five quarterbacks in the NFL draft. Now, we are not scouts or anything by any means, but we do have a set of eyes and we know a little bit about football. So hopefully we can put two and two together here. So, Mark, I'm going to go ahead and let you go first. Or do you want to go first, or you want to go like
Well,
one,
I
one, two,
honestly do.
two?
Let's start with one. I think we're both on the
Okay.
same page that Stroud's going to be the top guy, the most pro ready, has the right size that you're looking for, 6'3", about 214. Played with some stud receivers at Ohio State as well. I really don't think there's much debate for him being number one. Number two, Lewis, I think is where the conversation gets interesting. Are we on the
Don't
same
do
page with
this.
Stroud though?
Yes, I think that's fair. Especially if you look at it from like a team perspective and what would fit best for the Panthers. I like CJ Stroud as one. I do think it's also kind of like the balancing of the floor versus ceiling when you compare
Hmm.
one versus two, which I think I hope we're on the same page with two, but let's find out here.
All right,
So yes,
all
we're
right,
on the same page with one. Who do
uh,
you have as two, Mark?
all right. Anthony Richardson,
I
and
knew you were going to say this.
yes,
Okay.
yes. For the Panthers specifically, here's why. I don't think Richardson's the type of prospect you would start week one of the 2023 season. This is where your signing of Andy Dalton comes into play to say, hey, you have an established veteran who started, more than 100 games in his career at this point, where he's your week one starter and Richardson learns from a guy who has played at a Pro Bowl level in the NFL. No, Dalton isn't what he was several years ago. But it's not about this season for Richardson's development. It's when he's ready and you want to turn the keys to the Cadillac over to him. He has his size and speed is something we saw with Cam Newton, except this guy's even faster, 6'4", a 4.4 40. Like, he will force defenses to be accountable and to play 11 on 11. It's not your traditional drop back in the pocket passer. You're able to design packages for him, RPOs, read option plays that take advantage of his speed. That can't be the only component of his game, Lewis. But the analogy I'd make to you is to hit a home run, you've got to swing for the fences. This is a swing for the fences. He doesn't have a ceiling. He might not have a floor either, but it's the size and speed. It's how the quarterback position is played in 2023 and beyond. Go to the Super Bowl, right? Chiefs are driving down on the final drive of the game, and it was Mahomes' 26-yard scramble that put the Chiefs in a position to put that game away against the Eagles. It's a component and facet of the quarterback position to be able to use your legs to make plays. That's not always to scramble. And I think Richardson would have the ability to do that. Again, is he going to be ready week one? That's probably what you want with the first pick. I just think there's higher upside. I could sell you on the downside of Bryce Young, but we'll get into that here in a little bit, Lewis.
So I think Anthony Richardson is so interesting to me because there are a lot of people who I follow, subscribe to, all of that kind of stuff, who know football a lot better than I do. And I feel as if as we move further and further closer to the NFL draft, more and more of those people are are starting to say, Anthony Richardson, let's talk about it. Like let's have a conversation here. Um, I would do like tiers with my top five quarterbacks, right? I think that like you have tier one is the guys who I think are going to be Pro Bowl caliber, who could definitely come in, have a lot of success in the NFL, who I feel like are the it's like there is less um there's less concern with them. You know what I mean? It feels like that floor is higher. And I think that's CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. I have Bryce Young as my two. Um, but Anthony Richardson, to me, in terms of like tiers, is more like this wild card tier where I think that we aren't giving Anthony Richardson enough credit for what foundation he already has, what mechanics he already has. He has the ability to play really well from the pocket. He has a good pocket presence, and I think that's kind of forgotten about sometimes because of his athleticism, because of his size. His accuracy, I think it's like almost there. It's the kind of thing where you tweak a couple of basic mechanics, and his accuracy could improve. So to me, like I look at Anthony Richardson, and I keep saying the exact same thing this entire offseason, which is that to me, it's like a Patrick Mahomes-esque situation. That's just recency. Like I'm not trying to say he's going to be Patrick Mahomes, but it's the kind of thing where if he gets drafted early, goes to a team that has a good offensive system around it, has a good coaching staff, they can train him, they can help build him, and so you don't rush him into starting. I do think Anthony Richardson very well could start week 1. I do think that is a possibility, but I do think that it may be better off for him to have a little bit of time to grow and learn. Bringing up Andy Dalton, I think, is a great example. But this is one of those situations where sometimes picking number 1, if there is not like a for sure number 1 guy, is almost harder because you have to make a decision.
Yes.
Versus
I'm with you there.
Make a decision for you. You know what I mean? Like, so if, like, let's say, now here's like, if this is the situation, right? Let's say, CJ Stroud goes 1, Bryce Young goes 2, and then the Cardinals are up at 3. They have Kyler Murray. They're not going to pick a quarterback. So then you have one of these higher tier teams. Maybe it's the Colts who pick 4. Maybe it's some of these other teams who are further back. They have the opportunity to trade up a Cardinals roster that is very bad right now. So the Cardinals get more picks. They trade up. And then you have a team who may be more likely to take a flyer on Anthony Richardson. Maybe, the picks drop a little bit and someone gets him like in the top 10, top 15. You don't know. What I'm saying is, like, I hear everything you're saying, and it would not shock me if Anthony Richardson ends up being one of the better quarterbacks in this class. But it's so hard. It's so hard to know because I do think with any of these quarterbacks, it's going to be what system do they go to. But my number 2 is Bryce Young. A big walk around way to say that. I do think that obviously the size is a big issue, right? And we've talked a lot about the notion of like, sometimes there are rules and then there are exceptions to those rules. And it's hard to just say that every good quarterback in college that is like 5'10" and a little bit around 200 pounds is going to be the exception to that rule, is going to be the Drew Brees, is going to be the Russell Wilson to that rule. So, that is a little bit tricky, especially when you're thinking number 1 overall. But I think if you were to remove size from the equation and just compare everything else, that's a big part of the equation, I know. But if you do that, a lot of people are going to put Bryce Young over CJ Stroud.
Yep.
I think that if the Panthers feel confident in their ability to protect him, I think that I could totally see Bryce Young going number 1 overall. But to me, it's Stroud 1, Young 2, and that's like tier 1 of the quarterbacks. And one thing too, I know I've talked a lot, but one thing too here, when you look at the draft, when you look at like the books and stuff like that, right? I'll use DraftKings as an example. Last week, it's been Stroud at like minus 110 or something like that, and then like next up has been like Young at like plus 100 or something like that. So essentially for the number 1 pick in the draft. So it's been like Stroud, Young. Stroud has been the favorite. Last week, it shifted for a little bit where they were both sitting at minus 110. And so essentially it was a toss-up. And now if I go to DraftKings and look at their sports book for the number 1 pick in the draft, Bryce Young, I think this may have even changed from...
we got breaking news here on WRAL Triangle and Two.
No. Oh, wow. Okay, so maybe I looked at it incorrectly. But right now, when I look at it, Bryce Young is sitting at minus 120, and CJ Stroud is sitting at minus 105. So that's as of, according to this, that's as of Thursday. Oh, no, this is talking about the NFL draft. So, yeah, they have Bryce Young at minus 120 and CJ Stroud at minus 105 right now. So, technically, Bryce Young would be the favorite to get the pick. But that's what I'm saying, right? Right now, it's gone from this clear CJ Stroud as the favorite to a bit more of a toss-up between CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. I don't think you can go wrong with either one of them as the quarterback. But I do think it's going to be more about what you do to build around them if they will ultimately have success. I'm sorry. That was a lot of talk.
You're fine. So Young would be my 3, and the recipe of success for him is get 5 bodyguards in front of him. So if it is the Panthers that draft him, Okay, what did the Panthers do last year? They brought in Ike Ekwonu to serve as an anchor on an offensive line to protect the blind side of whoever your quarterback is. You're going to need him and 4 other studs up front to be able to keep your rookie QB upright. Now, you can say that about any rookie QB, but most first-round picks aren't 5'10", 204. Like, I don't know if it's like a
Soaking
204
wet.
of what his playing weight will be, Lewis.
No.
But, you mentioned Drew Brees. You mentioned Russell Wilson. Those are the exceptions, not the norm when it comes to not young rookie quarterbacks, but undersized quarterbacks that have success in the NFL.
Yeah, that's all. That's going to be the concern that follows Bryce Young, regardless. Even if he has a lot of success his rookie year, even if he, has a great start to his career, anytime injuries start to mount, anytime he misses a game because he gets hit or something along those lines, that's when the questions will
Brees
start
had his
happening.
shoulder injury early in his career. Another quarterback with a similar build, Tua Tagovailoa, he's had his share of injuries early on in his career as well. So it's not to say Bryce Young is either of those quarterbacks. It's what his history shown us with the quarterback of that stature. I don't include Russell Wilson Russell Wilson's thick.
He's big.
He's a little bit of a different mold than Bryce Young. So do you have Richardson at 3, Lewis? And we'll keep this rolling.
I do have Richardson at 3, but Richardson to me is almost like he's like a wild card tier where
Yes.
I feel like he's truly just kind of floating ethereally. And I will say too, one thing about Russell Wilson was always so good and I still think is like this at avoiding hits. He knows when to slide. He knows when to get down. He knows when to get out of bounds. Like I remember because he came
baseball player. That's why, Lewis.
Exactly. Player. Yeah. Exactly. So something to keep in mind. 4. Who do you have?
Levis out of Kentucky. I think if he goes to the right team, you get the cannon arm, the prototypical size that you look for in an NFL quarterback. Everyone was sleeping on Justin Herbert several years ago when it was Joe Burrow and Tua ahead of him. And Herbert could end up being the best of the bunch. I'm not saying he will be, but he could in that 2020 class. Lewis, you said something earlier, and this is not the flashy thing to say. I think franchise coaching, head coaching, offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, and personnel is a lot more important than an individual prospect's ability. There are exceptions to that, no doubt. But if Levis goes to the right team and the right system and the right fit, he could have success. That's like what I'm trying to do for our listeners and viewers, Lewis, is lay out what's the map, what's the roadway for success for each of these quarterbacks. I'll take Levis out of Kentucky at 4.
So my thing with Will Levis is I can't trust him because he puts mayo in his coffee and he eats bananas without peeling them. That's sicko behavior. Number one. No, but so I do agree. Will Levis is going to need to go somewhere where he can grow. I look at, so in my pick at number 4, I'll just go ahead and say this, is Hendon Hooker. And I think I look at the ascension in college, right? Hendon Hooker was someone who continued to get better. I think that, Will Levis may kind of offer a little bit more of upside just because of, we haven't seen what his peak is yet. And he has such great physical attributes as a cannon of an arm, but he really struggled last year, especially with some of these interceptions. And when I look at Hendon Hooker, he's someone who his growth going from Virginia Tech to Tennessee was just ridiculous. And I know some people are going to criticize, Heupel and that offensive system for kind of being just very quarterback friendly. And I think that's fair. But what Hendon Hooker had to do was a lot of, post-snap decision-making, especially when throwing deep. And so because of that, I think he may be a little bit of a step ahead. Obviously, the ACL injury is tough. He is older. So depending on how much you value that, I know just in general, a lot of people like, athletes who have a high RAS score, who are trending upward in terms of athleticism, who are young, who are going to grow into their body still. And, I think the prime example is like Jamar Chase, right? Who was dominating people 19 years old, takes that year off, tests amazingly. He's 20 years old. And now he's had a couple of, all pro, if not all pro seasons. And he's 22, I think. So you want to try and find those players who are athletically, who test very well and are ascending up. So that would be my only concern really with Hendon Hooker at number 4 in this list. But I put Hooker at 4, Levis at 5.
Okay. Okay. I
Yeah,
would flip
you're
the
getting
two.
spicy.
I've got Levis at 4, Hooker at 5, and you mentioned the ACL, and then Hooker being 25 years old, Lewis. You hit the nail on the head there. So it's like, how does he continually get better? And he's at an age where there's some quarterbacks that are 2, 3, sometimes even 4 seasons into their NFL career
Yeah.
by the time he's entering the league.
It's the Stetson Bennett to Lamar Jackson comparison. It's like Stetson Bennett
Yes.
is, he's getting drafted this year. He's going to be, whatever, 26, 25 or something like that, while Lamar Jackson's played like 4 or 5 seasons and has already won MVP and all that kind of stuff.
And we're
It's that
talking
comparison
about
all over again.
we're talking about Stetson Bennett the fourth, because there's apparently 3 other renditions of Stetson Bennett. Just for our listeners and viewers, so they know which one we're talking about here.
I will say this too, though, right? Like, so I think with these quarterbacks, I think the top 3 are going to be the ones that are going to come off the board early, and then I think the bottom 2 are going to fall later into the first round, because I really think we cannot underestimate just how much hype there is around Caleb Williams and Drake May next year. Both of them are going to be incredibly talented, and I think if either one of them were available in this draft class, they would go number 1 overall. So it almost is kind of like that point. If you're a top, 60, if you're picking top 16, right, and you don't see like any immediate path towards success for yourself next season as a team, do you want to invest that first round pick in a quarterback who you may end up getting another quarterback the very next year? It's like the Josh Rosen and Kyler Murray for the Cardinals way back when, where they picked Rosen in the first round and then Kyler Murray at the first pick overall like the very next year. So that is something to keep in mind as well with how these teams are picking in the first round.
Lewis, if you notice a twinkle in my eye, that's because the hair on my arm, you can see it, it's standing up right now. Bring the Heisman to Chapel Hill. We need it here in the Triangle. Drake May and Company getting after it in 2023. Sign me up.
One step at a time. But I do think, obviously it's going to be between those two, but I think that Caleb Williams, because he's playing in LA, I think is automatically going to have a little bit of a head start, but it'll be interesting to see.